November 20th, 2001. A security guard at Switzerland's Richard Wagner Museum watches a visitor admire a 400-year-old ceremonial bugle. The quiet confidence of someone who belongs in rooms filled with priceless objects. Then the guard notices. The man is sweating. In a gallery cold enough to see your breath, beads roll down his temple. His coat bulges on one side like he's hiding a brick. Within minutes, the visitor sits handcuffed in the back office. Within 48 hours, investigators across 7 countries piece together something impossible. This sweating stranger is a 29-year-old French waiter who earns tips pouring wine. He has no criminal record, no art training, no connections. Yet he has stolen 239 masterpieces from 172 museums across Europe over 7 years. Paintings by old masters, medieval weapons, Renaissance goblets, Baroque sculptures, all with a combined value of $1.4 billion. Not one alarm ever sounded, not one camera ever flagged him. He walked past motion sensors, laser grids, and armed security 239 times, strolling out the front door with their treasures pressed against his chest. But here's what makes this truly insane. When police finally raided his home, expecting to recover the greatest art haul in history, they found nothing. Every painting, every sculpture, every artifact worth over $1 billion had vanished overnight. The world's most prolific art thief didn't get caught by sophisticated technology or elite investigators. How did a waiter fool every security system in Europe? And what happened to $1 billion in stolen masterpieces? 1995. A medieval castle converted into a regional museum in Thann, eastern France. Breitwieser is 22, a waiter on his day off, wandering exhibits the way he has since childhood. His father collected antiques and hung oil paintings throughout their Alsace home. When Breitwieser was 10, his parents divorced. His father, in a final act of spite or grief, stripped every wall bare on his way out the door. The boy who had grown up surrounded by gilded frames woke one morning to empty plaster. Now, 15 years later, he drifts through a dim gallery and stops. An 18th-century flintlock pistol gleams under dusty glass, its stock inlaid with silver scrollwork. No guard in the room, no camera pointed in his direction. He tests the case lid, unlocked. His hands tremble as he lifts the weapon, slides it beneath his jacket, and walks. Through the exhibit hall, down the stone staircase, past the ticket desk, and into the autumn sun. No alarm, no shout, nothing. He drives home shaking, certain sirens will find him. Every set of headlights in his rearview mirror becomes a police cruiser. He waits for news of the daytime theft. Check the local paper. A week passes. A month. Silence. The museum never filed a police report because it never counted its inventory. The pistol had sat in that case for decades, and no one remembered to verify it was still there. That silence was all the confirmation he needed. It answered a question he hadn't known he was asking. What if the security guarding these treasures is mostly theater? Security systems scan for masked intruders, prying open windows at midnight. They do not scan for well-dressed young men who pay admission, admire the collection, and leave with a single piece tucked against their ribs. Breitwieser hadn't outsmarted the system. He didn't defeat the system. The system never saw him. Months later, still without police, he returns to the same castle in Thann. The pistol's case holds a new artifact. The lock remains unfastened. The same guard leans against the same wall, scrolling through the same newspaper. The museum has no idea it was robbed. Breitwieser slips out with a second piece. He begins refining his method. Weekday afternoons, never weekends when crowds swell and eyes multiply. Tailored coat with deep interior pockets, pressed shirt, the disarming air of a young gentleman on holiday. Move slowly, confidently. Identify something valuable yet portable. An oil painting no larger than a legal pad, a jewel-encrusted goblet, a ceremonial dagger. If screws secure it, deploy a Swiss Army knife. If a case protects it, test the lock. If the room empties, act. If someone enters, pretend to scribble notes. He walks out the front door with the quiet confidence of a man who paid to be there, and that confidence renders him invisible. By mid-1995, 12 artifacts have vanished into his possession. No alarm, no interrogation. Only his girlfriend notices the growing collection, Anne Catherine Kleinklaus, a librarian's daughter who spots unfamiliar antiques appearing in his bedroom. One night, he leads her to his mother's attic and flicks on a lamp. Paintings lean against every wall. Goblets line makeshift shelves. A medieval crossbow rests in the corner. He confesses everything. Her pulse hammers. She should leave. Instead, she listens as he describes each theft as a rescue mission. He asked her to join his next outing across the Swiss border, not as a tourist, as a lookout. She loves him. She loves art. She says yes. What will happen to her the moment something goes wrong? And will she see the danger before it swallows them both? Anne Catherine never imagined herself as an accomplice. She grew up in a house of quiet shelves and card catalogs. But Stéphane speaks of art with a reverence that makes theft sound like devotion. The first time she accompanies him, her job is simple: stand by the gallery entrance and cough if a guard approaches. Her nerves hum, but she discovers an unexpected talent. She notices details Stéphane misses: the camera's blind spot behind the Roman bust, the security guard who steps outside for a cigarette at 2:14 p.m. every afternoon, the tour group whose bodies block the docent's sightline for exactly 90 seconds. With Anne Catherine feeding him intelligence, Stéphane moves faster and bolder. She isn't a passenger, she's the system upgrade. By 1996, they operate like a two-person heist crew from a caper film. Stéphane scouts alone, mapping targets and security gaps. Anne Catherine joins for execution, positioning herself near the gallery entrance with a guidebook and a bored expression. When she coughs, he knows the guard has turned. In seconds, he lifts the piece, tucks it beneath his coat, and meets her at the exit. They walk out arm in arm, the stolen artifact pressed between their bodies, and cross the nearest border before anyone counts the inventory. They repeat this dance every 2 or 3 weeks, hopping borders like it's a road trip. France, Switzerland, Germany, Belgium, the Netherlands, Austria, and Denmark. Geography serves strategy. Never hit the same region twice in succession. Keep investigations scattered across jurisdictions. A Renaissance goblet vanishes in France. 2 weeks later, a Baroque painting disappears in Belgium. No single police force connects the dots. The numbers climb like a fever chart. 7 thefts in 1995, 14 in 1996, more than 20 in 1997. By 1998, they average 1 theft every 15 days across 7 countries. Interpol knows somebody is looting Europe's museums at an unprecedented pace, but they have nothing to chase. The few witnesses describe an unremarkable young couple. No license plate, no fingerprints. Except for one incident in Lucerne that year, which plants a seed of doom Stéphane will water 4 years later. Meanwhile, in a quiet Alsace town, the attic of Stéphane Breitwieser's house transforms into a secret wing of the Louvre. Over 100 stolen artworks line the walls or rest on makeshift stands. A painting by Lucas Cranach the Elder, dark and devotional, depicts a gaunt saint in brown robes. A lush landscape attributed to Jan Bruegel the Elder shows peasants harvesting beneath impossibly blue sky. Antique weapons crowd one corner. A ceremonial saber with a gold-wrapped hilt, medieval crossbows with original strings, flintlock pistols whose triggers still click. Goblets of silver and gold encrusted with gems catch lamplight like frozen fire. Tapestries hang from exposed rafters. Oil lamps from Ottoman workshops sit beside a 16th century brass astrolabe, its celestial rings still rotating smoothly after 400 years. Stéphane spends hours there, arranging and rearranging, sometimes by candlelight, to see the art in the warm flicker it would have known in the homes of dukes and cardinals centuries ago. If you've been keeping count, you'll notice something strange. A man who steals more than $1 billion worth of art should be rich. But Stéphane still waits tables. None of these treasures ever surface on the black market. No ransom demands. No whispers among underground dealers. Insurance investigators are baffled. Almost every art theft is about money. You steal a Rembrandt to sell a Rembrandt. But nothing Breitwieser takes ever goes up for sale. The usual playbook, follow the money, hits a dead end. By the end of 1998, investigators shift their question. Not just who is stealing all this art, but why isn't he cashing out? The answer sits in that attic, on those crowded walls. Stéphane Breitwieser never intended to sell a single piece. He isn't stealing for profit. He's stealing because he cannot bear to live without beauty on his walls. A thief who doesn't need money is a thief almost impossible to catch. But a thief ruled by compulsion is a thief who will eventually walk straight into the trap his own obsession builds. How many more museums can he rob before hunger consumes him? And what would his family pay for it? By 1999, the method had mutated into madness. Stéphane Breitwieser has evaded motion sensors, border police, and international databases. He has walked past guards in 7 countries with their treasures pressed against his chest. But he cannot evade himself. The void his father left has become a black hole, and every stolen painting only feeds its gravity. Up in that attic, surrounded by masterpieces no museum knows are missing, he spends evenings in a kind of ecstatic trance. He wipes dust from a crystal goblet with a chamois cloth, the same way a conservator would handle it in a climate-controlled vault. He tilts a frame to catch the lamp's glow at the exact angle a Renaissance patron would have admired it 4 centuries ago. He walks Anne Catherine through his favorites, whispering artists' names like prayers, reciting provenance he memorized from exhibition catalogs, introducing each piece as if presenting old friends at a dinner party only they will ever attend. To Anne Catherine, the attic is both sanctuary and prison. The man she loves is sinking into a world that has no exit except a cell. She pleads during one late-night argument, surrounded by 100 stolen masterpieces.
We have enough. Please, stop.
Sometimes he agrees. He means it. For a few weeks, he stays away from museums, and she lets herself hope. But the high from the last theft fades like a drug leaving the bloodstream, and the itch returns. One afternoon, he detours into a church and wrestles a 150-pound wooden Madonna statue off the altar, barely fitting it into his hatchback. Another time, he revisits a museum he already robbed, doubling down on risk for a piece he spotted the first time. In the heat of summer 2000, too warm for his usual trench coat, he conceals a rare pistol beneath his shirt and walks out of a gallery with sweat soaking through the fabric. He cannot stop. If you think about subscribing, now's a good time. The story is about to pivot from the thrill of getting away with it to the moment everything collapses. Anne Catherine delivers an ultimatum.
Stop stealing!
Or she leaves. He promises. And for a while, he keeps his word. Then, November 2001 arrives, and Stéphane hears about a certain artifact on display in Lucerne, Switzerland. a 400-year-old ceremonial hunting bugle, inlaid with ivory, resting in a glass case at the Richard Wagner Museum. The kind of object that sings to him across centuries. But Lucerne is the one city in Europe where his fingerprints sit in a police file. In 1997, a guard caught him with a stolen painting under his jacket. Swiss police detained him, took prints, then released him after he spun a tearful excuse about youthful stupidity. That lucky escape planted a dangerous seed. Even if caught, he could talk his way free. Now, 4 years later, compulsion overrides caution. He tells Anne-Catherine he wants to drive to Lucerne to see that bugle. She cannot believe what she's hearing. Return to the city where a guard might remember his face. Where does a database hold his identity? She refuses. If he goes alone. They fight. Tears. Accusations. The kind of argument that strips love down to its bones. But the obsession has its claws in him deeper than she does. He kisses her goodbye and drives toward Switzerland without a lookout for the first time in years. He knows the risk. He knows Lucerne is the one place in Europe where he is not a ghost. He goes anyway. What happens when a man who has beaten every security system finally walks into the one room designed to recognize him? November 20th, 2001. Lucerne. The Richard Wagner Museum sits beside a still lake, winter bare trees casting long shadows across its stately facade. Stéphane Breitwieser pays the entry fee, pockets his ticket, and strolls inside alone for the first time in 6 years of theft. His pulse drums. Some part of him knows this is the endgame. He finds the bugle in a glass case near a window. Ivory inlay catches the pale light. He positions himself to block the view, waits for the room to clear, and tests the lid. Unlocked. He lifts the heavy artifact and slides it into the secret pocket sewn into his coat's lining. Outside, a man walking his dog pauses near the museum entrance. Through the window, he watches a well-dressed visitor buttoning his coat indoors, moving with odd haste. The dog's ears perk. Stéphane emerges, attempting his usual casual stroll, but sweat glistens on his brow despite the November chill. The coat bulges on one side. A car with French plates sits nearby. The dog walker jots down the license number and marches to the front desk. Minutes later, a guard discovers the empty case. Panic spreads through the staff. Descriptions fly. Frenchman, early 30s, dark trench coat. One guard furrows his brow. This description matches the unsolved incident from 1997. The ghost has returned. Police trace the plate to Anne-Catherine Kleinklaus. Swiss authorities alert the Franco-Swiss border. Within hours, officers stop Stéphane's car as it crosses into France. The 400-year-old bugle still presses against his ribs. In a stark interrogation room, fluorescent lights humming overhead, investigators lay the artifact on the table and expect the usual routine: denial, lawyer, and silence. Instead, Stéphane Breitwieser opens his mouth and does not stop. He admits the bugle. Then he keeps going. Theft after theft. Museum after museum. Country after country. The interrogator's pens struggle to keep pace as he recites details no suspect should volunteer. He names all 239 pieces from memory. Titles, institutions, dates, even the weather on certain heists. He describes the layout of his attic inventory, which wall holds the Dutch paintings, where the medieval weapons hang, how he arranged the goblets by century. He speaks with the enthusiasm of a collector showing off acquisitions to fellow connoisseurs, not a criminal confessing to 7 years of international theft. He seems relieved, even proud, as if finally sharing a secret passion with people who might appreciate its magnitude. Swiss and French authorities coordinate. They need to raid the Breitwieser family home in Mulhouse, France, immediately. An international warrant flies across fax machines. Officers assemble for a dawn search. They expect an attic overflowing with Europe's missing masterpieces. In custody, Anne-Catherine learns what's coming. Perhaps out of loyalty, perhaps out of spite for being left behind, she makes a phone call. She warns Stéphane's mother, Mireille. The police are coming. They're going to search the house. The warning is clear, and Mireille knows exactly what it means. As officers fuel their vehicles for the raid, she steels herself to do the unthinkable. French police cars screech to a halt outside the house. They charge upstairs to the attic and find 4 walls stripped bare. The legendary collection, every painting, every sculpture, every artifact, has vanished. Where did $1.4 billion in art go in a single night? And what would a mother do when saving her son meant destroying history? In the hours before police arrived, Mireille Breitwieser destroyed centuries of irreplaceable culture. To shield her son from the full weight of 239 theft charges, she became the greatest art vandal in modern history. In cold panic, working by the glow of a single attic bulb, she hauled oil paintings down the narrow stairs one by one. With kitchen scissors, their blades dull from years of cutting vegetables, she began slicing. Canvas after canvas, the fiber tearing with sounds like whispered screams. Baroque portraits of forgotten nobles, Renaissance landscapes where shepherds tended sheep beneath golden light, romantic-era scenes of storms and shipwrecks, all shredded into ribbons that curled on the floor like dead leaves. What wouldn't cut, she dragged outside into the frozen pre-dawn darkness. In the woods behind the house, she stacked antique wooden panels and frames into a pyre and set them ablaze. Flames devoured masterpieces that had survived the 30 Years' War, the French Revolution, 2 world wars. Black smoke curled into the winter sky as centuries of human genius crumbled into ash, sparks drifting upward like souls escaping. But she wasn't finished. Smaller items, ornate goblets that had graced the tables of bishops, ancient daggers with hilts wrapped in gold wire, antique pistols whose mechanisms still functioned after 3 centuries, jewelry that had hung around the necks of countesses, she loaded into her car. At the Rhône-Rhine canal, she stood on the bank in the freezing dark and hurled them into the water one by one. Silver and gold glinted briefly in the moonlight before sinking into the murk. Sculptures too heavy to burn, she smashed with a hammer, the stone splintering, then dumped the fragments into the canal. The waterway became a graveyard of culture, its mud floor littered with the debris of civilization. By the time police searched the property, Mireille sat in her kitchen trembling, feigning surprise. The attic smelled of smoke. All that remained of Stéphane's once magnificent collection were a few scraps of canvas on the floor and embers cooling in the woods. The scale of loss defies comprehension. Works by Lucas Cranach the Elder, gone, only charred fragments recovered. Pieces attributed to Corneille de Lyon, gone. An oil sketch by Antoine Watteau, reduced to ash. Medieval artifacts that had survived 500 years, obliterated in hours. Of the 239 pieces Stéphane confessed to stealing, police recovered only 110 intact or partially intact, most fished from the canal by divers in the weeks that followed, dripping and damaged. The remaining 129 are gone forever, either burned or lost in the mud. A French detective tells the press he has never witnessed cultural carnage on this scale. When the case reaches trial in 2003, the courtroom hears a story that sounds like a tragic farce. The world's most prolific art thief, caught by a dog walker's hunch after evading every sophisticated security system on the continent, spills his entire 7-year history in a single interrogation. His own mother, in a twisted act of maternal love, that will haunt art historians for generations, then incinerates over $1 billion in irreplaceable cultural heritage to cover his tracks. The judge stares at the evidence files, hundreds of pages thick, and struggles to comprehend that one man with a Swiss Army knife inflicted more damage on Europe's cultural patrimony than any single criminal in peacetime history. The legal consequences feel almost insultingly small against the scale of destruction. Stéphane Breitwieser received 4 years in a French prison for theft and handling stolen goods. He serves 26 months before parole. His mother receives 3 years for destruction of cultural property, a charge that barely captures the magnitude of what she burned and sank. She serves 18 months. Anne Catherine receives 18 months for aiding and abetting. She serves 6 months, emerging from prison into a life she never imagined would include a criminal record. The museums get nothing. Insurance payouts cover only a fraction of the loss. Many pieces were so old they carried no policy for their true value. Masterpieces that survived Napoleon's armies and Hitler's looters were wiped out by one panicked woman in one winter night. Here lies the cruelest irony. Stéphane stole art because he loved it too much to share. But by hoarding everything in a single attic, he guaranteed that once he fell, the entire collection would fall with him. If he had sold the paintings one by one, scattered them across private collections, they might still exist somewhere, quietly admired. Instead, one panicked afternoon destroyed the lot. Possessive love consumed its own object, and the story refuses to end. Released in 2005, Stéphane swears to his parole officer, to journalists, to anyone who will listen, that he's finished with theft. The obsession, he claims, burned out in prison. He isn't telling the truth. In 2011, French police execute a search warrant on his new apartment and discover 30 stolen artworks leaning against the walls, fresh acquisitions from recent museum visits. Back to prison. In 2019, investigators catch him selling stolen antiquities on eBay, the digital marketplace revealing what shadowy dealers never could. The raid on his mother's home yields another trove of loot and stacks of hidden cash. Now he wears an ankle monitor that tracks his every movement under house arrest until at least 2033, forbidden from entering any museum or auction house without prior approval. Maybe the authorities will loosen the leash then. Maybe technology will have advanced enough to watch him remotely forever. But who believes this man will ever stop chasing beautiful things? The void his father carved into him at age 10 has never filled. Perhaps it never can. On a quiet winter afternoon along the Rhône-Rhine canal, the water sits placid under gray sky, reflecting bare branches and the distant spires of old churches. Beneath the surface, somewhere in the silt that has settled over 2 decades, lie the remnants of a gilded goblet whose last owner was a cardinal, the charred corner of a painting frame that once held a Watteau sketch, the twisted metal of a ceremonial bugle that had survived 400 years only to end up as evidence in an underwater crime scene. Fragments of beauty entombed in darkness, waiting for no one, remembered by no one, lost to the very permanence their creators sought. Stéphane Breitwieser walked into 172 museums across 7 countries and strolled out with $1.4 billion in art without tripping a single alarm. He fooled every security system in Europe. He fooled guards, curators, investigators, and border police. He fooled the woman who loved him and the mother who destroyed everything to save him. But he couldn't fool himself. And if you want to see what happens when obsession collides with having the things easy, check this video about a nurse outsmarting the whole FBI.